getting to that place. But deep work is so important. And you look at all these people who have won the Nobel Prize, even in specialists or even multidisciplinary people who need to build those connections, they work kind of 4 hours a day,
Mhm.
but deeply, right? And most people never get into that deep work phase.
And
Yeah,
how you communicate that is so important, like you said.
right. And I think with quantum, the issue is like so many articles are wrong. Like the
Mhm.
reason I found my niche earlier on is because there's all these pop science articles that are just completely wrong, and then scientific papers that are just very difficult to read. So my niche became that, like, here's for a technical audience, but not a physicist. Nothing matters anymore to me. Every goal I had disappeared at that point, right? Because I was just like, nothing else matters.
All right. Welcome back to the show, Anastasia Marchenkova. Thank you for coming back on. I know we talked about a couple years ago at this point, and we had a very interesting conversation. We talked about like quantum computing. We talked about different content creation. You definitely have an interesting story in that regard too. So let's go ahead and just get back into things. How are you holding up?
Things are good. Things are busy. I think so. There's been a lot going on in my life. I lost my dad this year. I lost everything this year. But, the silver lining there is that there was no one else in the world whose opinion mattered to me more than my dad.
Mhm.
Right? So I kind of took a step and said, like, okay, now I can kind of do whatever. Like, what actually matters to me? Losing him meant, going back deep and thinking about all the things I was missing out on and focusing more on family, friends, and what impact I really wanted to have in the world.
Mhm.
So there was some healing, obviously, going through that, but also just some amazing things that came out of that, and a new growth phase. I feel like I became more confident in myself, and yeah, releasing cool new things outside of the scope of what I was doing.
Dustin Miller, poly-innovator.
That's so cool. And I know it's a very sad moment in that time, but like you said, it's a new chapter, and at this point, you can expand wherever you want to, not just in
Hmm.
the confines. Because I know your parents were very important to you. Even talked about that in the last episode too. And having that freedom now, I feel like is super exciting for you.
Yeah, and it's definitely that they weren't ever holding me back, right? But
Yeah.
it was just that we were so focused on one thing, and it was just we were focused on building Bleximo up, and now I just learned so many lessons in life and learned what's important. So now I'm prioritizing the family aspect. And honestly, looking back, the pandemic was almost one of the best things that happened to me in many ways, right? Like I
Mhm.
I don't know where I would have been without, one, the content creation that I did, but also the fact that I ended up moving in with my dad and my brother over the
Mhm.
pandemic, because we were like, why are we paying for separate apartments
Yeah.
when we could just live together? And just having the last few years here with being so close with my dad and my brother was just an amazing, amazing experience. Like, I'm so happy. And I'm like, that's what we should be doing, right? I mean, work is great, accomplishments are great, but family is what matters, and making them proud is what matters. And yeah, I think you'd be very proud.
I think so too. And I remember you. I think we recorded back in like late 2020. So you were at his house there, your family's house, and you had that one frame of reference, so to speak. That's where your mind was. That's where you're like we're focusing on. And this show's all about kind of changing those frame of references too. We have different ones that we look through. Like each kind of expertise or knowledge area is a different frame of reference. And by cross pollinating them, you can obviously see new innovations, but changing frame of reference also gets us rejuvenated and excited about the next
Right.
chapter too.
Right. Yeah. It's that's the thing. I think that's the cool thing. Like, you start out in a niche and you kind of build through it and you become confident in that expertise. But then you build through another niche, and I saw a graph just a couple days ago, right? It's like knowledge is dot or
Mhm.
yeah, knowledge is just dots, and understanding is when you start making those connections. So as you start building up all those different factors and building those connections, that's when magic happens. And I feel
Yeah.
that content started, I'd been in the quantum field for 15 years at that point. So even if three years ago when we first talked, I was already so deep into the space, right? Then
Mhm.
content started becoming a thing. And now I'm connecting it even more to introverts and personalities and more of those soft social skills. And it's building up in a really interesting way, in ways that I haven't seen before, but I felt like there was a niche for. And it's always fun to be competing in a niche of one, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think honestly, out of most of my guests on the show, you were probably one of the more specialist people that I had on.
Right.
But I definitely could tell that you were multidisciplinary at heart, and I remember like going back on our interview, like thinking back on it, either when I was repurposing things or whatever. When I was looking at the interview, I was like, wow, I really focused a lot on your content side of things and not enough on the quantum side of things when I interviewed you first time around. But I realized, like, as much as I regretted not going into quantum enough, I also was really excited to help highlight that part of you because you still were kind of exploring the content at that point. And I know that now that with content, you have content around quantum, but content around the introvert and personality side of things. Speaking of which, I have a couple interviews I should send you to where I talk to people about personalities. I think you'll
I'd
really
love
like.
that.
Yeah. Also, I saw the like Barbie pink nail polish there.
I
Did you
know.
see the new Barbie movie?
I have not, and I was really excited for it, but reading some reviews, maybe I'm not as excited about. I don't know, so I haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I was my nail lady, and I always do the same color, and I'm like, today I will do something different.
I think it looks good. And honestly, I saw the movie. I was not interested in Oppenheimer very much, even though I know it's supposed to be really good. I was really into the idea of Barbie movie, not just because it's an all-star cast, because they both have all-star casts, but just something about it attracted me to it. And I went with a friend. And honestly, I would give it like an 8 out of 10. Like it was actually
Nice.
pretty good. And I'm not generally that generous about movie ratings, so it's just okay, cool.
I think it's something different. It's something new. I mean, I love Margot Robbie because who
Yeah,
doesn't? So
right.
that
Ryan
also
Gosling
helps.
too.
Yeah, so it's a good interesting thing. I have this like idea. I just hired a social media manager, which I'm sure we'll talk
Really?
about more. But she's like you now have the pink nails. Go to the lab, take pictures with your quantum chips with the pink nails. Like she's like, we're gonna go on this Barbenheimer hype right now. Like this, you're perfect for it. So I think we'll put out some content. I think that'll be kind of fun.
That's genius, actually. Thinking along the lines of that kind of. I actually made some posts around Barbie too, just because I wanted to get on that hype.
Hmm.
It's just one of those things too, where especially since like the science of Oppenheimer and the more philosophy of Barbie, they've been kind of going back and forth on
Hmm.
social media as well. So, round two on the show. What have you been doing so far since you last came on? Since it's been a couple years, let's see what is new.
What isn't new? Life has completely changed, like I mentioned at the beginning,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, I mean, so quantum is still, kind of working on that. I mean, I had been working on that for a few years. Content continued. Content is starting to shift. I'm also in a new phase of content. Like I mentioned, hired a
Mhm.
social media manager. So we're working on Anastasia 2.0 and what that looks like. So expanding beyond that because quantum is great and very, very interesting field. It's still very young in its infancy. It's always going to be a core part of me because I have been in the field for 15 years. But
Mhm.
now, as we're building to the phase where quantum might actually have real applications, I want to start talking about, and I have been talking about it, right? People started asking me questions about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, AI, how it can affect those different fields. So becoming more multidisciplinary here. So I have a few series planned. Again, taking into account all my experiences, I rarely talk that much. I post on Instagram if I'm at a venture capital event or at a startup incubator event, you know, looking at angel funding and investments, things like that. I did a venture capital accelerator last year as well. So figuring out whether I want to launch a venture capital fund or not and learning about that space. Which looking back, I'm like, I wish I had this when I started my first companies because I would have
Yeah.
done so many things differently, knowing now how to look at it from the investor side and do the due diligence there. So putting more of that in, and I realized like I'm in
Mhm.
San Francisco, I'm in Silicon Valley, the world of like the some of the best startups in the world. These are my friends. I have access to that. So I want to start showcasing other people's startups and what they're doing. I met a guy at a venture capital event a month ago or something, and they are building he's hard of hearing, so they're
Mhm.
building subtitles for the real world. It's a hardware attachment, it attaches to your glasses and uses ChatGPT and OpenAI tech to actually show you what people are saying and project that onto the world. I was like, that's what I want to showcase. And I have this
Yeah.
channel. And so we're going to do a little tour of their company and the lab space, right? Because I have my lab space. I've shown that to people. I'm going to do more on that. But also, I want to show other people's. And yeah, we actually did a 30-minute call like a couple weeks ago to talk about social media and content strategy. And literally, his first TikTok after he posted went viral. It's at like 17 million views. And I was like,
I'm so proud.
is amazing. Like because that's like the impact I want to have. I'm like, this is what should be funded. This is the innovations I want to bring on the world, and I want to make my channel focused on not just quantum computing, but
Mhm.
innovations, especially in deep tech. Because I think that's the future. Manufacturing is the future. All those
Yeah.
hardware things are so important.
I love all that, and it definitely makes so much sense for you. And it seems like you've definitely started a new phase. And something that people don't think about with content is that, yes, you might have a niche at first, but then you spread out. Did you ever come across the book called Range?
No.
Okay. It is about generalists and people who are wide ranging. But one particular example in there is how like people often go wide, they dabble quite a bit. They kind of have that jack of all trades approach, they find something they like, they niche down. And then it kind of goes in a cycle where people go wide and in, wide and in. And I kind of see that as different phases. When you find something you really care about, that becomes your next phase, your next focus. And I've been trying to incorporate that into content mindset where people are like, okay, what is your phase right now? What is your focus right now in your content? And by calling it a phase, by calling it something, by giving it kind of a title, your followers can then understand what you are about during that time. And for people like us who are multidisciplinary, I think that's very important on how we market ourselves. So sure, your first phase might have been around, like, let's say quantum computing in particular. Eventually, you kind of went more into the Web3 kind of crypto space, and now you're kind of going more into VC and obviously social media as well too. There's a lot of overlap there, but they're still kind of like their own phases too. So I'm wondering how you could organize that in your own content structure ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, so I have a business coach and he calls it seasons, right? So it's like you go through
Exactly.
seasons of life and even the short term, right? So I was building out this course, which I'll talk about more later, I'm sure, but I spent 3 months basically heads down doing nothing
Mhm.
else but building it, right? And it was just like, this is a season that's going to suck in some ways because it's just hard. It's creative work. I'm tossing everything else to the side, going like, it's 7 a.m. I'm supposed to go to the gym, but I have inspiration to write, so I need to sit down and write. Like there's just no other option at this point. So that's the season. So yeah, that's the thing. But I look at it. So I took a course very early on in my social media journey from Katerina Mello. Her handle is
Mhm.
Professional Traveler on Instagram. And I actually met her last weekend in person, and
That's
it
awesome.
was really great. It was really fun to just like be a peer now, you know?
Yeah.
And she talks about content pillars basically,
Mhm.
and you should really pick three different content pillars when you're creating social media. And mine was always just quantum, dabbling a little in other things, right? But even when you go to my website, I have kind of three pillars that I talk about. So yeah, so it was quantum, a little bit talking about startups, and then the other one I wasn't really sure about, right? But now as life evolved, the content pillars evolve. So 50% of my content moving forward is still going to be tech, deep tech,
Mhm.
right? 30% now that I've moved on to this phase where I'm looking more at soft skills, introversion, that's going to be the 30%. And then 20% is going to be a little more of this like lifestyle, which is going to a VC event or I'm remote working, so we're traveling and showing a little of that. So I kind of break it down into kind of three categories. So I
Mhm.
still have the main tech thing. That's what I want to be known for, but also bringing in the other aspects of me to kind of round out as a content creator and also as a
Yeah.
human, right? Because
Right.
people want to humanize you a little bit. I get those comments on my
You're not just
uh,
a robot.
I'm not a robot. I'm not a robot, I promise. I try. I blink now. I've learned how to blink when I make videos. That was a big comment that I got from my early videos. But the problem is that, okay, so people were convinced I use a teleprompter. I don't. I would memorize my scripts. I would write
I
everything word
couldn't
for
even.
word. Yeah, I would memorize it. But the problem is when you memorize, and I'm nervous, right? I'm new to
Mhm.
this. I would mess up, so I would only be able to like have a one sentence that was good and then cut it there. And then because I was so focused on saying the sentence out loud perfectly, I wouldn't blink, and so just there was no blinking in the entire video. So
Yeah,
that's the
when I
story behind that. I blink.
at least now it's out there so people can understand. When I first started with content, I would try to do memorizing the lines, or at the very least, I'll have it there, read a line, pause, read the line, and do it that way.
Hmm.
But I could not do the scripting, if you will. I'm
Yeah.
way more free form improvisation. One thing I want to just touch on is the phases still, because I'm really as a nerd of content creation, I'm a nerd about your phases. I just
Hmm.
like wanted to go into that a little bit. I like to think of it as what you're focusing on. So most of the time you have like your main phase like you talked about there, and then you might have 10% kind of keeping the flame alive on a previous phase and 10% sowing the seeds for your next one. But one thing I kind of discovered this year is that some years you actually have to focus on multiple phases at once. I'm in that same boat this year as well, where because of the interviews in 2020, I got really behind on some of my other phases. And so I had to catch
Hmm.
up this year. So I'm juggling three, maybe four right now. And I feel like you're kind of in that same boat as well. This is like a multi-phase year.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, my dad died, and I was just like, nothing matters anymore to me. Every goal I had disappeared at that
Mhm.
point, right? Because I was just like, nothing else matters. I don't care about quantum. I don't care about tech. I don't care about any of my projects. I don't care about like, I couldn't
Yeah.
do anything. The only thing that kept me going was just like pure discipline. I think of just like going to the gym. I just always took a walk. Everybody, I
Mhm.
also lost my dog last year, so it's been horrible because I would always take a walk with him every morning, right? And I was like, you know what? I don't care what's happening. I'm going to take a 45-minute walk every morning. But yeah, so when I started working with my business coach, that's the thing we talked about, is that this phase, this season of discovery, and that's what
Mhm.
we're going to do. And I wasn't pressured to like take an idea and run with it and like focus, right? It became like, we're going to try a bunch of different things and see one, sure, what works, but also what feels good, right? It's like, where do I want to be? Do I want to be an entrepreneur again,
Yeah.
right? Do I want to just go get a stable job and work in tech and code? Do I want to maybe step back and even like, just chill out? Do I want to just drop everything and travel the world for 6 months, right? And that was a good season of discovery. And now you're right. This is what happened is I started exploring, and I was like, this feels good. This feels good. This feels right. This is what gives me a lot of energy and joy, and I feel like I can give a lot of value to the world in. So now
Yeah.
I'm running these parallel tracks, right? And you're right, because it's all kind of going at once, but I did sit down and like build this course for 3 months, but also thinking now with my social media manager, okay, we're going to expand in all these aspects. Now I'm like going crazy because I'm like, I have so many project ideas and I want to like do them all right now, and I'm like, okay, let's get this course fully out there. I just launched in beta, closing out the beta in 2 days, and then going to fully launch probably end of August, early September. That's the plan. But
Mhm.
then we're building up the other aspect of like Anastasia 2.0 and social with that, and making sure we're focusing on exactly what I want to get out of it. And then building up kind of the science side as well, right? So it's all coming in at once, but I think I'm in a place now where I can take it, right?
Yeah.
And it's requiring less. So I have this like, I don't even remember what I watched. I think it was a YouTube video with like energy diagrams, right?
Mhm.
I'm most productive in the morning. Like
Mhm.
honestly, like for creative, like deep work, 7 a.m. to lunch is my time. And as I started going through these phases, I was like, okay, I have these three projects running at once,
Mhm.
but some things are really light weight, right? I'm like, I can do that in the evening. I can do it during the 3 p.m. afternoon slump. They're just emails. So I'm going to
Mhm.
schedule it then, versus like this creative course building work, scripting, research for highly technical videos. It has to be in the morning for me. And so I'm protecting my energy very strongly around that now, or else it's just not going to get done. And I just, yeah, content's interesting, right? Because I'm sure you've experienced the burnout of
Oh,
making content, and it's rough. So I started tweaking, right? And I just realized with my old content, like I just didn't find as much joy in it anymore
Mhm.
because it didn't feel authentic. So I put a goal down this year. I do a Trello board every year. Actually, I used to do it every 3 months. Now it's yearly. But a big one was make content authentic to me. And I
Mhm.
that was a big goal. Now I feel like we're on the path to getting back to that place.
That's so good. And I just love the way you think about content too. You take that kind of back end organizational approach, but the way you explain it is full stack, if you will. And I just love too how you're exploring it. And I wish I could hire people like you are, but like I'm glad you got a social media person because at least that'll help you take some pressure off and you can focus
Hmm.
purely on the creative. And you understand your chronotype too. Like you're waking up early, you're an early bird, and you understand that you're going to work better at that time. And time blocking is so hard for specialists, let alone multidisciplinary people too.
Right. Yeah, I've loved, so Cal Newport's work has impacted
Mhm.
me so much since I think I discovered him I was 19, so almost 15 years now getting to that place. But deep work is so important. And you look at all these people who have won the Nobel Prize, you know, even the specialists or even multidisciplinary people who need to build those connections, they work kind of 4 hours a day,
Mhm.
but deeply, right? And most people never get into that deep work phase. So yeah, I mean, I say I worked on this course full time, but it was like 3, 4 hours of full time writing a day. It wasn't 8 hours. I think that's impossible. I think it's very hard to code deeply 8 hours a day. I think it's very hard to do anything that's strenuous for 8 hours a day. So 4 hours a day, yeah, 3 months. Yeah, that's a
Well,
big course.
and I think one thing interesting thing about I remember us talking about Newport last time. Tim Ferriss talks about attention units, and like some people who are spoonies might have their spoons, just these energy like units, if you will. And I think our chronotypes, when we are awake most, you have better access to those units as
Right.
well, and so it's easier to do that deep work because you quicker access to your energy source.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So I'm like, okay, I'm there. The creative bug has hit. Maybe I can sit down some days and do 2, 3 hours straight, which is not recommended by Cal Newport. I think he has a chart of like 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, then it drops significantly. Sometimes I can push 3 hours in a row. But yeah, as I was saying, like 3, 4 hours, it'd usually be like an hour and a half block, a little bit of a break, an hour and a half block, right? And but it would be in the morning when I'd just be
Mhm.
most able to get that done. And that was way more impactful than, yeah, probably the 5 hours I would do in the evenings after work or something like that, because I couldn't focus as well.
Well, sleep chronotypes are definitely a big part of energy management, but also personality. And so something we talked about at the beginning is your new venture into personality. So introvert versus extrovert or in between. You recently came out with the extroversion for introverts course. Can you explain that product?
Yeah,
And we get into that.
yeah, I mean, I've been mulling about this for so long.
Mhm.
It started when I was 20. I started my first company accidentally. I crashed the servers at my university one night with my
Oh, no.
co-founder. And it was a very Mark Zuckerberg story. The honor board was mad at us, but we got off without any sort of issues. And professor found out about it, gave us a check for seed funding, and said, like, you're starting a company. That's it. Like, you have no other options.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then I walked in the first day to the startup incubator with my co-founder, and they said, go outside and talk to 25 customers and don't come back until you've done it. And
Ah,
yeah, as an introvert, as a physicist, I was like, nope, nope,
unified. Yeah.
nope, can't do this. And I did it. I stayed in the program. And it was the first time someone really pushed me in that. And I remember also a mentor telling me later on, you have the IQ. If you get the EQ, you're going to be unstoppable.
Mhm.
I was like, that's interesting. And then I started meeting people around me in the startup space. And I was like, wait, this person's like, there was a person in my incubator group. He was like 5 or 6 years older than me. This was already his second company he was starting. He was super smart, but he could get people to see his vision, right? He
Mhm.
also had those skills. And I was like, and I guess at that point I hadn't really, dived in a little bit into the Myers-Briggs and everything, but nobody told me kind of those limiting beliefs, like you're an introvert, so like you're supposed to be quiet and shy. So I
Mhm.
saw this person, I was like, super smart, but can also do this. That means I can do this too. I can learn how to do this. So I started reading books about charisma and talking to people because I saw it. You know, I saw people that could do that, and I just genuinely believed I could learn it as well. And over the years, I very intentionally took the steps to realize like soft skills are so important. So every role I took moving forward, I was like, I want to be technical, but I also want to do people facing work
Mhm.
because I want to learn how to sign a contract with a client that's, you know, $100,000 or $1 million. It's not a skill you can kind of learn off YouTube, really. You just have
Yeah.
to go and do it. So I was very intentional over those years and years of doing this and forcing myself to go through this process and go outside and talk to people. And so content, even though like filming, I don't know why, like the filming aspect is the worst part of the for me of the entire creation process. I'm like,
Interesting.
I hate staring at my face. I
Mhm.
sound stupid. I get perfectionist about it. And it's just for some reason I just that's the biggest barrier for me, right? But I still do it every single
Mhm.
day, right? And I show up and it gets easier and easier every single time. So getting over that barrier was always important to me. So yeah, it was showing up. And then I realized how many people in the world are being held back because they can't
Yeah.
communicate as well, right? So I saw this in my venture capital lab where I'm like, these brilliant scientists have amazing products, ideas, innovations that can change the world, but they can't pitch, so they can't get funding, which means the research is going to die in the lab. Or
Mm,
even, I'm at work in software engineering and I see these young engineers who are scared to speak up and talk about the fact that they're struggling with something and they need help. Academia is very toxic for this. It's really not okay to say I don't know anywhere in academia. So you sit there for a year wasting time, whereas you could have asked someone for help, right?
right.
And gone so far ahead. So I'm sitting there thinking, and I kept seeing the same comment over and over on my comments. They're like, "What's your Myers-Briggs?" I'm INTJ. They're like, "There's no way you're an I." I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay, yes I am, but I can fake it," right?
Yeah.
And kept seeing these comments. I was like, "There's something here. There's something interesting here because people are feeling a lot of pain from this." So yeah, I just it had been kind of written down as an idea, and I didn't even have the name for a while. But then when the name hit, I was like, okay, there's something here. And I started just breaking it down. And it's like, what do I really need to talk about? And what do I really need to get to? It's like, one is self-awareness. I am extremely self-aware, hopefully, to maybe
I
a
think so.
bad degree, right? To maybe a perfectionist degree, but also the fact that I, created content, I could go back and look at it and fix things, and I'm never going to be a great public speaker like Tony Robbins, but I don't think you need to be Tony Robbins to be great.
Yeah.
Because I worked at Coursera. My boss was
Mhm.
Andrew Ng. If you watch any of his videos, he's the most awkward guy on the planet. But I would hang on to every single one of his words because he was so good at storytelling. Then I realized, wait, that's what we did in my startup incubator, right? We told a story. That's how we capture an audience's attention. Oh, that's what I'm
Mhm.
doing with my content, and it all started coming together. And one day, if I was working with a coach again, doing this exploration, my season exploration, and he was like, "Okay, let's talk about, like, you've raised venture capital funding, you've done this, like, what's there?" And I was like, I just have this idea of, first you need to have self-awareness.
Mhm.
Then imposter syndrome is a huge thing for smart people. And I'm like, smart people won't speak up because they think they're dumb. And, the people who shouldn't be talking are maybe talking too much.
Mhm.
So how do we get over the imposter syndrome? Oh, storytelling. That's what happened. My coach actually made me do this. I get a lot of comments because people don't know me. Oh, diversity hire, whatever. It doesn't hurt me anymore because it's ridiculous. And one of the things that my coach made me do is go on my website and write a list of all my accomplishments for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
So even on a bad day, I'm feeling down, I go over there, I'm like, look, 15 years of accomplishments don't lie. You get confidence by gathering evidence. I saw this morning from Alex Hormozy, not the other way around. You don't just gain it, you have evidence and you show up every day for the person that you want to be. And you say that, and then you have confidence because you've done those steps. And so I'm like, oh yeah, like diversity hire, go look at my website,
Go F
right? Like
yourself
it
for
just
one too. Like.
like it's so ridiculous, right? That it just doesn't matter anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah, then confidence, and then the next things were just like, then I started building out the modules, and I'm like, here's all the practical things. You start with
Mhm.
really body language and charisma, and that's the first thing I started with, where I was like like I need to like sit up straight,
Mhm.
like all those things. But that's such a big life changing moment. Or introverts are actually good at active listening, right? So that's not a problem there. But small talk, right? Introverts hate small talk. And
Mhm.
I've realized that those in between moments, right? People get on a call, someone's late, and everyone's on their phone or like typing away. Those are the moments where relationships are built.
They add up. Yeah.
Yeah, and people ignore that. Those are so impactful. I'm like, okay, we're going into that. Then I'm like, then we talk about the writing, right? So I start with scripting. So I go into that. And then tying it all together with speaking in presence. And it all just came together literally in like a few hours where I built this outline and I was like, this is very interesting. And this is the culmination of like 12, 13 years that I've been looking at it, the hundreds of books I've read, the mentors, the coaches I've hired, the classes I've taken, from acting
Yeah.
classes, voice classes, coaching. I put all one thing, and I was like, this is very interesting. And it's very interesting also because sometimes I work on projects,
Mhm.
and the more I work on it, the more stupid I think it is. And this
Ooh.
one, yeah, and this one I kept building, and I was like, "This is awesome."
It's starting to fuel itself. Yeah, that's awesome.
And yeah, it just something fit there, and I was just like, "Look, if I had such pain with this, and I've seen so many results with this in my life, there's
Mhm.
someone out there that has the same pain."
You got a
And
market for sure.
yeah, and then, actually talking to my friends recently, they're like, "It's brilliant." Like, everyone was expecting me to put out a quantum computing course, right? But there's so many professors out there, the courses are already there, universities are doing it, it's out there. Whereas this is something I've never seen before. And then people were just like, "It's brilliant. 50% of the world is introverts, and your entire audience is pretty much introverts." It's like, perfect.
You are badass. I will say that. So much that I want to reply to on that, but I also want to make sure I don't talk too much. It's one of those things where personalities are so fascinating, and a lot of people misunderstand them. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, the mom to my swim lesson. We talked for like an hour after the lesson, and one of the things we talked about was personalities and how I was expressing to her about my friend was introverted, and so she automatically assumed, oh, so they're shy, and I'm like, no, that's not necessarily like they're not correlated per se. I mean, they're not causated, I guess you could say. And how there's plenty of people who I've met who are introverted who are extremely sociable, even more so than me. And I lean more towards extroversion, despite the fact I'm more of an ambivert myself. And there's a lot of extroverts who I've met who are extremely shy. Shy is a trait that you have based on top of based on yourself. Like, do you have confidence in yourself? Introversion, extroversion is where you get your energy, as you know, but just for
Mhm.
audience sake. And one thing that one of my recent interviews, Eric Thor, who I'll send to you afterwards, he was talking about how these Myers Briggs personality types, they're more of like things you can use as a mental model. They're not necessarily who you are. Maybe they're who you are in this moment. But you could learn from those other models and think about how they perceive the world and how that changes your own perception as well.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. That was the thing, right? Well, you're not an introvert because you are on social media. No, it's how you recharge, right? I get home from these networking events. I would like to say I'm decent at them these
Mhm.
days, but I need that hour with my laptop alone
Yeah.
to just sit and like just think
Yeah.
and be with myself before I go to sleep.
When I first met you, I was still kind of surprised that you were introverted. I think I could understand it a little bit because we chatted on Instagram and whatnot. But through your videos, you're obviously very confident in the way you speak, probably because of the perfectionism. You know what I mean? Like you wait till the best clip.
Right.
I definitely understand that. As someone who likes talking, right? I actually had to go the opposite way with these interviews. My number one skill I had to learn that was really hard for me was active listening, learning to shut up and actually pay attention to what the person's saying. Because it's hard because I want to add my own side of your things too. But this is an interview about you, and it's a back and forth. It should be discussion. It shouldn't just be one side. But it's one of those things where I'm the one interviewing you. I should make sure I'm listening, and it's a skill that I had to learn. And I think it's a good example for anybody, extrovert or introvert. There's skills you can learn, and it's okay to not know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a joke. I love my beta testers right now. We have a Slack community and they're getting so on board the meme train. But one of them is like, we tell introverts they should speak up and be seen. Have we tried telling the extroverts to shut up for a second?
I saw your post on LinkedIn about it, and I actually made a post in response to it. I'm not sure if you saw it, but I agree. It should be both. Like, we should tell
Mhm.
extroverts to shut up more. We should tell introverts to speak up more. We shouldn't tell anybody to do anything. Let's state that for one. But, like, sure, I think the whole idea is going outside your comfort zone.
Right.
Extroverts really should shut up more and listen and have that process. I think that by doing these interviews, I got better with people in person because I was able to listen a lot more. And that helped my social skills quite a bit.
I mean, of course, it's that practice, right? I was talking to some folks as I was getting this beta testers into the program where they're like, "Well, I only go to a conference once a year." I'm like, great, but you can practice every single day with human beings. That's all going to transfer over to the real world. And I think maybe we talked about this last time, but TikTok helped me become way more concise because I had to fit an entire quantum concept into like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Really helped in every aspect of my life.
It's hard to be concise. That's one of my weaknesses too. And I remember, oh crap, what was it? So when I first started going out as a young adult, I have always been a talkative person. I'm sure you can tell, but the ability to communicate and get to know somebody fresh in the moment was still something I still needed to learn. So I went out of my way to learn how to sing by going to karaoke. But one thing I was actually more focused on was like going out of my comfort zone and approaching different tables. Like I tried to go to every table in the bar and talk to the people who were there. Even if it was just something simple like, hey, what are you singing tonight? Or why aren't you singing? Cool, moving on to the next one. And that skill now allows me to approach any person, whether I'm at a networking event. It was the funniest thing. Just one more anecdote before we go to the next question here. I went to my high school reunion like a week or two ago. And it was the weirdest thing because only about 10% of my class actually showed up. And everybody kind of defaulted to these groups. Some of them were people who I knew in high school, but sometimes they were just people who they just met with at the reunion and just sat with them the whole time. It was me and one other person who was actually mingling, which I think the whole point of a reunion is to mingle. And so I was going to everybody, trying to mingle as many people as possible. I feel like I got more out of that reunion than most people did because they were just kind of chilling in their own spot.
Yeah, of course. And people who don't want, so it's hard to do. I mean, that's a really hard skill to do, first of all, but you kind of took that baby step of, okay, I'm going to ask the one question, I have a list of questions. It doesn't have to be a big production, right? It was just like, yeah, I'm going to go up to a couple tables and just ask them the same question and okay, move on. And that's it. That's already such a huge step. And especially for introverts, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
And especially at networking events, I talk about this in my course. It's like everyone's kind of there for the same reason. So it's kind of easy mode, right? Oh, what's your interest in this topic? How are you involved in this topic, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's so standard. You don't even have to think of something new on the spot. It's just like that's all. That's all you have to do. And at least do it once. Networking event once a week. The growth will be so high.
Now, you're not what you know, you're who you know. And that's why I brought up that story too, is that like extroverts and introverts both kind of use this skill, but being able to just find that common ground. If you're at an event, you're there for the same reason. That is your common ground. You can use that as a point of entry. It's all about just getting that point of entry. From there, it's a pretty smooth sailing for the most part, but you have to get that initial start.
Exactly. So it's, when you break it down like that, and I think that's how I became comfortable as I was building this or doing this journey of myself, but also building out this course. I'm like, I'm building a framework for introverts just to have a little bit more security in this moment. But once that moment hits, then you know how to respond and react because you don't want to stick to a script, but a framework helps you in those situations. And then, one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm not faking this anymore.
Yeah.
It's easy. Even on phone calls, I'm building out a couple new sections right now with the beta group, but the two different personality types is like you're on a call with someone that will not say anything and you have to kind of pull information out of them. And the opposite, someone won't stop talking and you need to kind of interrupt them and be like, hey, by the way, I have a question. Both of those things. And I was literally on a call with one person from the beta group and I was like, did you notice I'm doing this to you? I was like, this comes naturally to me now because I've done it so much. And he's like, yeah. It's like you learn those skills, but then it happens naturally over time and you learn it and you're not faking it at some point. That's just who you are.
Exactly. And understanding what the other person's personality type, I think, is really helpful too. Like as a host, I try to make sure, like, hey, if it's a more introverted guest, we'll stop like 40 minutes in, 50 minutes in, like just, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing energy? Do we need to cut this shorter or are you going to go for longer? Are you enjoying it? It's regardless of your personality type. If someone's enjoying the conversation, they're enjoying the conversation. But understanding that some guests may want to end quicker because they're getting drained. Other guests who are extroverted might go for longer. And that same context can be applied to other conversations as well.
Exactly. And then it's, for you as a host, it's also the self-awareness of like, reading the environment. And I talk a lot about micro reactions and the idea that some of the most important information is not from the answer, it's from the reaction that people give you. And you can dig into some really interesting things with that.
Well, I mean, just even hand gestures or as a host, like saying and nodding and just reacting to that person, acknowledging that what they said is heard too.
Yeah.
We actually, this other topic we didn't get into last time, I mentioned at the beginning, I was kind of like, oh no, we didn't talk about quantum hardly at all. So can you explain Bleximo's quantum accelerators just as a whole other side topic here? I know we're kind of flippy-floppy there, but I'm really curious about it, and I feel like other people are too.
Yeah, definitely. So quantum computers are in different stages. They're being built in different ways. And a lot of companies, like the ones you've heard of, IBM's and Google's, are building universal gate quantum processors. So these processors can be reprogrammed for any sort of problem, any sort of algorithm that you want to build. So every qubit is connected to every single other one. There's a actual measure called quantum volume or algorithmic qubits released by some companies that talks about like how good a quantum computer is, and they talk about connectivity, so the map of like how they're connected.
Mhm.
However, even back in the day, I think even my first article, I talked about the fact that quantum computers are more like GPUs. They're not going to replace regular computers, but they're going to enhance
Mhm.
other computers with their own quantum routines. GPUs are application-specific circuits. They do one thing really well. They do the graphics portion really well.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't we build quantum computers in that same way, right? So for example, a pharmaceutical company does not care that their chip can do financial applications. They just wanted to do the pharmaceutical stuff really well. So the idea of Bleximo is then like, why are we building it that way? Why are we not co-designing these algorithms and the hardware together? And that
Mhm.
brings a lot of benefits. So one of the problems with quantum computing, why it's not, really having that advantage yet, is because we need to scale up to a certain amount of qubits. There's a lot of errors that accumulate over time. So the thesis here is if we can design a chip for a specific algorithm, we can make it much smaller, use a lot less qubits, use a lot less error correction. So for example, if you say like, okay, I'm running these algorithms and we have to do gates, qubit 0 only has to talk to qubit 7 and 13, right?
Mhm.
Instead of having to build all the other connections, you just build those too, right? And you create that map of the qubits, and it's super hyper optimized for that specific problem. But then you can significantly reduce the amount of qubits that you need for error correction. You can manufacture qubits more easily, these sort of problems. So that's how we approach that. So it's a different approach, right? Because again, these quantum volume calculations count on topology and everything for the universal gate systems, whereas ours are not as connected, but because there's less components, it's cheaper, faster,
Mhm.
better for those specific algorithms, but it will never run the other algorithms.
It's interesting too because at this point I love the big picture explanation you had there, and a lot of people just don't understand that quantum QPUs are obviously more specific for a certain kind of
Right.
type of task. Like you said, it's more of a GPU kind of thing. It's more specific for a different nuance. It kind of makes me think of just different AI softwares that we're doing now due to our more archaic type of technology we're using now. These AI programs like ChatGPT, they're kind of hard to run. Like, sure, we're using them pretty for free for a lot of different tools, but they're kind of slow. They're kind of pretty expensive if you start using them at greater volumes. And I almost wonder if there's a way to use like these QPUs for this AI technology. And then when we have our computers, we'll put on our GPUs for video games or financial spreadsheets to view that. But then we also put in these QPUs for AI based stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, so QML is a very interesting topic. So I have so many things to say here. I'm trying to figure out where to start. So
Yes.
first of all, it looks like with quantum machine learning, it is really only going to be effective at this point on quantum type data, which
Okay.
is still fine because there's a lot of things that are quantum data. However, I then have people approaching me saying, well, we want to build like a general AI. And there's no proof that a brain is quantum yet. We don't
Mhm.
have an explanation, so people are just like, well, it must be quantum then, because that's kind of like hard and difficult to explain. So like it's probably quantum. We don't have proof of that yet, and it may not be. So then QML would not apply to this state. So this is like an interesting deep dive on that aspect. But however, there's a lot of problems that can be applied. Like again, with the QML, like a lot of things are quantum data where it could help with that. So I think it's like figuring out exactly those applications and how to put them into a quantum state. So I have this example. People yell at me about this all the time on my social media. They tell me I'm wrong, and I'm like, I've been studying this for
Yeah.
15
Yeah,
years.
you're the expert. Like, okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert in every field of it, but I've thought a lot of these things through. And so there's an algorithm called Grover's algorithm, and it is a pretty general algorithm that can speed up search quadratically, right? So I talk about Bitcoin, RSA encryption, elliptic curve can be
Mhm.
crushed pretty extremely by Shor's algorithm. And then people are like, okay, well, what about mining? It's a hash function. And I'm like, well, there's no proof right now hash functions can be broken by Shor's algorithm. And they're like, you're wrong. Like, there's Grovers that can quadratically speed it up. Like, yes, in theory, it can speed up search. The problem is how do you encode a hash function onto a quantum state?
Hmm.
Like, tell me. I'm very happy for someone to tell me that, but like I can't think of it. It's easy to encode a atom, like a quantum state of a particle onto a quantum state because that's a very natural mapping. How do you encode a string?
Mhm.
How do you encode you know, a number? Um, I'm happy for someone to figure it out, but like that's why I'm like, yes, on a high level, yes, Grovers will speed up everything. Practically, I have no idea how it would actually work at this point. There's
Like
an
defining
interesting,
the path. Yeah.
yeah, like so there's an interesting paper that I was looking out for quantum machine learning for like image recognition, things like that. And they're like, okay, so the quantum state, the block sphere has three axes, right? If we say one is R, one is G, one is B, and you encode the pixel as an RGB, and that's the quantum state. I'm like, interesting. Okay, I can see that, right? But then it's like, well, what does the superposition of those actually mean? Like, how does the mathematics of that work? Like, it's a little
It's
interesting, but
gray.
I'm like,
Yeah.
at least I see where you can start mapping this over, right? I haven't seen it yet for,
It seems like a
hash
very
functions.
creative problem. Like you have to figure out, like you're creating that pattern. You're defining what that
Right.
could be. I mean, even when binary for the normal CPU or traditional CPUs, I mean, was created, like that's still something that's like a novel idea, thinking like 0 or 1, and which one it is, and then of course with quantum you have the in between. So it's just one of those things where like how, like you're saying, how do we go about doing it? And
Yeah.
there's probably different options. What will work best? That kind of thing
Yeah.
to figure
It's
it out.
very nuanced, and I think that's the thing with quantum where I'm so frustrated sometimes seeing content going viral that's completely wrong because the nuance isn't there, right? Another one that I get all the time is you're wrong. Oh God, the Nobel Prize that came out and everyone was on my comments telling me like, you're wrong. Like this study came out 15 years ago. You think I don't know? Like the Nobel Prize happens way after the study came out. I know exactly
Mhm.
what this is. I've read it a million times. I'm not wrong. You are not understanding the nuance. And issue is, quantum computers, quantum systems can talk at faster than the speed of light, right? Because when they collapse, you immediately know, the state of the other changes. Yes, but, right?
Yeah.
First, you have to somehow bring the systems together, entangle them, and bring them apart. That's going to be limited by the speed of light, first of all.
Mhm.
Then there's actually a classical communication channel that has to happen. So yes, so that's one problem. Then even after that collapse happens, you have a classical communication channel telling you how to interpret the data.
Mhm.
Those photons are still limited by the speed of light. So you have some data that you can't interpret. Is that actual information transfer? In the scientific like definition, no, there's a data point, but it's not information because you have learned nothing until those classical channels complete. So it's very nuanced. Everyone yells at me that I'm wrong. It's a lot of fun all the time to deal with that. But yeah, it's a really interesting field because of all these nuances and because of all these things of like, oh well, we have 400 qubits. Great, the qubits don't work, so it means
Mhm.
nothing, right? It's a field that you have to have a lot of information to really truly understand what's going on, and some people are taking advantage of the fact that not everyone has that information. So my content
Right.
tries to clear it up.
Well, and I think you do a good job at that. And something that kind of came to mind was I, s- I see experts of different topics on TikTok quite a bit, and rarely do I see people responding to those negative comments, oh, you're wrong, or you're wrong. But I've seen some that are really kind of funny in a way where they respond to those negative comments and then they like talk to them and explain to that person, or at the very least, they use that as a prompt, like stitching with it or using the comment as a video in order to make a video on that topic and like, hey, this is why this comment is wrong, blah blah blah. I wonder if that might be. I think you've done it maybe once or so, like that.
I've done it a couple times. I have a policy. I think this is good for any creator to think about of how you're going to respond to those sort of things. I don't
Mhm.
respond to attacks. I actually have someone that now clears that out for me every morning. So my social media
Ah,
manager goes and just deletes and blocks people who are just completely inappropriate, harassing. So I just never even see it. So my life is much better
that's
after
so
that
healthy.
happened. But yeah, I mean, there's some where it's like, you know, edge on the verge of being rude. And sometimes I'm at a place where it's like, I'm going to respond and make it a teaching opportunity. I don't love it because then other people will attack that person. But I did one recently, no, or not recently, but in one of my
Mhm.
latest videos where someone just commented like, post your GitHub code so we know you actually know how to code and don't just look good. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like, it wasn't like completely like horrible. And I was like, let's talk about this. One, not everyone. I've worked for companies that have our proprietary software. I cannot post my code.
Mhm.
So having all those GitHub squares is very popular in like the tech space. I'm not going to have that, right? Because I'm a research scientist, which means we will sit and think and write an algorithm for 2 weeks and then do one commit. And it's like 10 lines. It's a very clever 10 lines, right? But if you're comparing someone to a front end engineer that might be doing, 5 commits a day, I look like I'm not doing anything, right?
Right.
But also because it's proprietary algorithm work, I can't release it. So I'm like, this is not like, let me tell you a little bit about my work and how I do it differently. And I think I was unfortunately, a lot of other people attacked him, which I don't like when that happens. But he actually posted and he was like, apologized and was like, you actually changed my view
Mhm.
here. Which I felt like in that moment, for some reason, I just felt in that moment that person could maybe get a different perspective, right? Because again, it was on the edge, right, of the types of comments. Like I know when someone just is not going to listen, is not going to hear, I'm not going to waste my energy and time on it.
Yeah.
Here I was like, this is a very interesting nuanced point, and I wanted to bring up a point about just generally like the tech space and GitHub squares and all this, and talk about the differences in industry. So I will do that from time to time, and I have done that a little to those responses where I've posted another thing being like the same thing I told you, like this paper has been around for 15 years. I've been in the field for 15 years. I've known about this paper. This is actually a paper that fundamentally like shaped my research.
Right.
So let's talk about that. Now let's talk about the subtleties, right? So I always want to use it. I will only respond if I can use it as a teaching moment and not like a shame moment.
There's tons of like spam comments or just purely negative comments for the sake of negative comments, and so you can just ignore those. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I have someone ignoring it for me, so it's even better. But it's
Yeah.
engagement. It's engagement. I don't like making content specific for negative comments and engagement. I
Mhm.
don't like that Twitter seems to be evolving into that.
Mhm.
Contrarian viewpoints. I'm sticking very solidly to like I want to make content that's true and good, and that's what I'm going to be doing. And if that means less followers, that's fine, but I have the right type of followers, and that's the
Right.
people I want in my space and in my life.
It's about the 1,000 true fans, and also just to correct you, it's called X now. It's so stupid. I can't.
Still says
I
tweet. The
yeah.
tweet button.
I honestly, after Threads came out, I'm kind of like, I don't want to be on X Twitter anymore. Like, I just want to go on Threads. Threads has been so much fun. Everyone's like so happy over there.
Yeah, I love the beginnings of a social platform because nobody has a strategy, right? So you're kind of just like, I'm just gonna post random things, and it feels a
See
little
what
more
sticks.
free. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just feels a little more free, a little bit more fun. So yeah, it's been interesting, but I'm just like I can't handle another social platform right now. Like
Mhm.
I'm still trying to build up the. I think Instagram is definitely my next focus, so I'm gonna build that up. I do
That
like
seems like
what
your
they're
best
doing.
place.
Yeah,
Well, and Threads is basically Instagram's just Twitter alternative, and I wonder if they're ever going to merge them. One thing I thought was really interesting on Threads, on the sign up page, it talks about the Fediverse and how they're trying to go for that more decentralized approach down the line. Not yet, at least. I went on Mastodon and Gab and a lot of these social networks that are built on the blockchain and these Web3 kind of, decentralized approaches. Ironically, some of them have failed at the decentralized and they got very centralized due to like buying out a lot of things. That's what happened with Steemit, for example. But what do you thought? What's your thoughts on these decentralized platforms, these technologies that are built on the blockchain? Do you have any
I
experience
mean,
with any of them?
no, I just don't like everything started coming out, and I was like, I'm too stressed with all these platforms. Like, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
chill then and wait and see what happens. And yeah, I mean, I just kind of took a step back from all of that because again, I protect my energy pretty strongly, and I block social. It's actually funny the more I start creating on social media, the less time I actually spend on social media in
Yeah.
terms of consuming. Like I think I scroll like Instagram reels like 10 minutes a day and that's it. I don't even scroll TikTok anymore. I
Mm,
just post and interact and go and do
yeah.
my own thing, right? So it's been an interesting shift in that. So the consumption is not there as much, and yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I think I'm excited when people are exploring new technology and seeing what it could bring. What value does it have over a non-decentralized application? Not super
Mhm.
sure. I'm not an expert in that. I haven't really poked into them, but that's kind of the question I ask myself in any of these things. Like, what benefit are we getting from that? And is that a benefit that's good, right? So there's the debate of like centralization, anonymous. It's like, is more anonymous good? Or again, when we're talking about like harassment on platforms and things like that, like maybe you shouldn't be able to be anonymous on some platforms, right? Yeah, so
Anonymity
that's
is
an interesting
hard.
question. Yeah, exactly. So total anonymity is hard, but yeah, there's it's like should you have to kind of stand by your words if you're gonna be able to post them online kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be, to be shown how the technology is improving. I'm working with a charity right now that they're releasing some NFTs and everything. So I love when people explore new technology. Like I'm never gonna say that's a bad idea, and
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes.
I feel like that question was kind of me throwing something to the wall and see if it sticks too, because I didn't know what your experience was with some of these platforms. Have you explored any of them much? I really have tried to talk a lot about the future of social media. I'm really excited about when Web3 becomes more dominant, because I'm seeing the issues with these centralized platforms. YouTube with the whole ad apocalypse, Twitter with this whole hole that it's digging itself. Twitch has been digging a super big hole, and a lot of people don't know about that. They're like changing all their policies, and people go on Twitch to become, live stream famous or whatever. But there's no discoverability on there. There's no
Hmm.
discoverability on that platform really. And so people are bringing their audiences to Twitch in order to live stream and have that interaction with their audience. It's a very great interaction to have with people, having that live chat. But the problem was Twitch was changing their like how much they pay their creators, and like you can't multi-stream anymore. So if you wanted to stream to YouTube, Twitch, and Kick or whatever, they wouldn't let you do it, and TikTok too, I guess as well. And so there was this kind of backlash, like, hey, why should we stream to Twitch then? Like YouTube pays us better, and they're not limiting us. And Kick is becoming a big like Kick actually I think exploded because of Twitch's faults. So their competitor grew because of these changes. And this all stems from that centralization approach. It's one company, one organization controlling the
Mm.
entire platform. Whereas with some of these decentralized platforms, since it's more of a democratic system, a lot of those issues should not occur on that platform, at least not ideally.
Should not, but definitely, wasn't there like
Happens.
a big story about this like free speech Mastodon thing that like in 3 days like got shut down
I
because
don't remember, but
and start banning people, and you're like,
oh,
look, there's it's a hard problem to solve, and I think people who are saying like it's an easy problem have no idea. I think there was a great thread where it was just like, like like Jack Dorsey, he's trying really hard, and it's like if you it was the founder of Reddit posted this, and it's like mostly when we building a social platform, like we just want everyone to like shut up and stop causing problems
right.
that affect like the 99%, because clear, we just want you guys to have a good time and enjoy this, but like the 1% are causing problems for the 99%.
Yeah. What do you see like personal assistants coming out, like changing the subject? I still love technology. I love nerding out with technology with you, so I just want to keep like digging and see what kind of things we can talk about, like Jarvis, for example, or these smart personal assistants. I mean, knowledge management is one thing you and I can nerd about for hours, but like I feel like, but Jarvis, I think like is an extension to that. It's like, what can we do to create these assistants, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've been hiring staff recently because I hit the limits of all the AI tools,
Oh
and
no.
the more I use them, the more I just see like here's all the ways humans are going to be totally fine
Yeah.
because AI assistants can't do this. They just there was a paper that came out recently that said that ChatGPT is getting worse at a lot of
Mhm.
topics, and it's actually I
I
had a
saw that.
conversation with someone about it's converging, right?
Mm.
I so influencers, people are just like, there's AI bots that can just talk about quantum now. Why are you special? I'm like, well, first of all, they're wrong half of the time. they're also boring. They're converging to the same type of conversation. My articles sound very different than a ChatGPT article. So, and it's getting, the gap is getting even more wide. So it's converging to this like tone and voice. So I don't think any of that is going to go away. These assistants, like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the 50% of time that they're already saving me and I use those
Yeah.
tools, but I'm finding the gaps where, like I told you, I hired a social media manager. I'm hiring a VA because they just don't understand certain nuances. I would love a Jarvis that actually
Yeah.
knew everything, but I think that's very, very far away.
Well, and that's an interesting point to make. Very far away as well. I feel like a proto Jarvis might be around the corner, but that wouldn't be knowing everything, like you're saying. It's definitely not going to be like a singularity AI kind of level. But I do want to mention that ChatGPT and these chat platforms, they're more of a generalist than a specialist,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that most people don't realize. That they're using the tool thinking that it's an expert in healthcare and in law. Like no, it passed the bar, sure, but just barely. And even then, like how well does it pass? How well does it actually know the topics? That kind of thing. And with quantum, that's a whole other topic too. That's very nuanced. It's very specific. And
Yeah,
how you communicate that is so important, like you said.
right. And I think with quantum, the issue is like so many articles are wrong. Like the
Mhm.
reason I found my niche earlier on is because there's all these pop science articles that are just completely wrong, and then scientific papers that are just very difficult to read. So my niche became that, like, here's for a technical audience, but not a physicist. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, they also don't have, like, you can tell them preferences, but they don't have that memory over time, you know? So, like, I was listening to the founder of Thumbtack, Jonathan Swanson, had a webinar about, it's called Delegation University, and how to use VAs efficiently.
Mhm.
And it's it was so interesting. I mean, he's insane and I love it. Like the amount of like outsourcing he does in his life. But, you know, one of his VAs he's been with for 10 years. And he gave this VA like a 21-page document with all his life goals and dreams and everything, and like learning the schedule and learning the preferences and all this information. Like, yes, you can feed it into the GPTs, right? But like it's because it's an aggregation of everything and not your preferences, it
Mhm.
starts getting a little bit like, you know, it again converges on what most people want, not exactly what you want always. And there's ways around that, but it's, for me, it's like a pain, right? So I was trying to get it to like write me like a fitness schedule,
Mhm.
right? The amount of work I had to put in to give it all that nuance, and still it couldn't like fully do it. Whereas a human would look at it and be like, oh yeah, this is an easy test to do. And I know your nuance, you like that person knows my chronotype and,
Mhm.
you know, all these other things. It's not there yet, you know, it's not even close to there yet, but maybe I'm pushing it like too far. I don't know how to do the prompts as well, but yeah, there's gaps. I use it for
Yeah.
basic things, but you know, even like the world of possibilities, right? So I'm trying to book a ticket and I'm like, okay, so I have two locations. Okay, I have like a friend in London who's here on these dates, friends here that we can maybe coordinate with, and I'm going through all these options in my head. I could give it all to ChatGPT and maybe it would do something, but then I have to
Yeah.
book the flight and everything, and then it doesn't know my window seat preferences and
Yeah.
how I calculate all those other things. It's just a lot. It's a lot.
All those
It
nuances.
become like I think that's the thing. It's like it must become a generalist eventually to be truly useful. So then we're back to the same problem, right? Because
Mhm.
like, okay,
Again.
well, you can tell me which flight to take, but then it's like, well, that flight doesn't have any window seats left, or like
Yeah.
seats that I like, or it's like not on my preferred airline and doesn't think of that.
And how big of an importance, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like is the window seat like an 8 or 9, or is it more
Right.
like a 5? That kind of thing.
Yeah, or like this event is like really important and I can't miss it. And you know, this is a sketchy airline. Like maybe that chance of
Yeah.
missing it is higher, or you know, just like looking at possibilities. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then it has to, yeah, again, go through everything and become more general.
Very good points, and I'm glad I asked because this I love nerding out with technology and having people to talk to about it's not always common. Um, I do think that something like Obsidian, where you have like all your local documents kind of in one place, maybe you can train Auto GPT on your documents on your own computer. Then you can have something that's more nuanced, but even then, you have to have a lot of data to feed it. And if you're not a creator, you might not have that data unless you've been
Right.
taking notes every day or something like that. So Before we wrap up, a little bonus kind of quick question here. Can you explain your dream of becoming a charismatic supervillain CTO? I saw that and I was like, I had to ask.
Oh, yes. I definitely can explain that. I So something I talk about recently is like the alter ego effect. So when you
Mhm.
step onto stage, if you're nervous about public speaking, think of yourself as a superhero. I love Darren Cross and Ant-Man. And like so it's just like, and I do that. So my VP of engineering way back in the day, he's like, let's talk about your career goals. And I just tell him, I want to be the villain in Ant-Man. And he's like, he just stares at me and he's like, that's one I have not heard before. Go on.
Yeah.
I am interested
Do tell.
in the situation. But yeah, like, so first of all, like the whole concept of his origin story and history, he was Hank Pym's graduate student, worked in the science, rose up in the ranks, worked with his mentors side by side for so many years, and then grew to take over the company, be a CEO, and work on technical strategy.
Hmm.
Like, doesn't that sound great? So there's a scene where he's introducing the Yellow Jacket suit, and I'm like, I wanna
Do
like
that.
feel that way. Like I want to feel that way, and it just hit me so much. That's who I
Oh,
wanted to portray, and it's yeah, it's really funny. And then I add in like without the murdery bits,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you know,
Maybe not evil, but like, yeah.
right.
I love
But
that.
but yeah, that's the thing where it's like I just love something about that just really captured me, and I was like this like niche Marvel person villain. Love Iron Man too, but something about Darren just like really got
Mhm.
to me. And they have these like fun fake interviews on Wired Technology, like he was a real CEO. It's like it's
Like
fantastic.
catnip, yeah.
It's fantastic. But really like I took it and I broke it down and I was talking about self-awareness. What worked about it? His
Mhm.
cadence of speech, the way he presented. It wasn't It's a technical release, but it's not, going into technical details. It's really about the vision and the impact. So I
Mhm.
take bits of that for my own speech, and cadence is super important. Tone, presentation, styles, like even the way he walks in. I
Mhm.
can take pieces of that and bring it into my own presentation.
I love that, and a lot of people don't realize too. Like, sure, we can model after heroes, but you can model off of villains too, and just take the good parts of what they do. There's actually a slight little movement I think I see on TikTok and YouTube sometimes where it's like a music compilation, like you were the villain in an 1800 story or something like that, or like you're a super villain on the rise, or like hero who just got broken so much that you turned into a villain. There's like these cool compilations of music just get you motivated going. And yeah, also one of the skills I learned as a host is like look at the camera to make sure I'm actually like, so when you're looking at the screen, it looks like I'm looking at you. But I had to see your expression. I had to look down because I saw how excited you got. It's like I had to see this. So yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's scientifically proven. There's a paper on the Batman effect in children, and
Hmm.
kids who were told to pretend to be Batman, had better
Batman.
results.
That's awesome.
Why can't that work for us as well?
Yeah. Well, 10 years on the line, I'll be Iron Man, you'll be Darren Cross, and we'll be fighting. So it's good.
Perfect.
Yeah. Something we touched on last time and a bit today is how your content is evolving in these different phases. So you have a lot of organizational work as well. What is next for you on your journey?
So Anastasia 2.0 is going to be coming out on Instagram. So that's going to be really exciting. And I'm looking at Instagram of kind of more of a portfolio of my life, right? So I think TikTok is very subject specific. I'll probably start a different account for this course, kind of cross pollinate between my tech and the Introverts account. But Instagram is going to be more of a portfolio and bring it up to the next level. So that's one thing there. This course release, I think I'm so excited about the community that's forming.
What is next for you on your journey?
Yeah, so first of all, we're going to be building this Anastasia 2.0. So definitely focusing on that on Instagram and trying to bring in this new phase of life, this new journey with the extroversion for introverts, just because I saw so much impact that I had just from one LinkedIn post about people really connecting with the stories. So I want to start building out that content more and more. On TikTok, I will start adding some of my more of that content there in terms of extroversion for introverts. I'll probably do a different account there just because it's going to be TikTok likes separate accounts for separate topics. So kind of putting those content pillars into different accounts and expanding that. But that's a huge organizational issue. Again, I had to hire someone to do this, to rebrand, talk about this. And going deeper, wider on the technical, the deep tech side, giving people, now that the pandemic is, over, coming to a close, I'm not sure where we are on the stage of that, but getting people insights into deep tech and getting people really fascinated about that. So I have so many friends that are doing these amazing startups, and I want people to know more about it, whether they want to become involved more in, whether investing or being a customer or getting a job there, or even just seeing the possibilities of this technology. So really focusing on the media, I think, in the upcoming future, for me on that end. Course launch is going to be a big one. So very excited about that as well. And then I have about 1 billion projects I want to do and spend time on. I'm doing an exciting talk. I don't know if I can talk about it yet, but in Europe. So hopefully we'll be able to see that online very soon. I'm just fits so much of my life purpose that I'm just so excited about getting to do this. And yeah, I mean, there's so many projects going on, and I'm just excited to get them all out in the world.
I love that so much, and I feel like just I could see the excitement in you, and that whole multi-phase year is perfect for you. And yeah, I'm so glad to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Hold on. Once again, this is Destin Miller, poly-innovator, Anastasia Marchenkova. Thank you for coming on the Round 2 PolyCast.
Thank you so much.
Innovators crave innovative products, which is exactly why the Polymath PolyCast is powered by Riverside.fm. With Riverside, you can achieve studio quality without the need for an actual studio. You'll get uncompressed audio and up to 4K video from the comfort of your own home. All recordings are done locally, which means that you and your guests will get the highest quality possible, even with unreliable internet. Hi, I'm Kendall from Riverside, and do yourself a favor and upgrade from cloud-based softwares like Skype, Zoom, or Hangouts. Try out Riverside today and use the link in the show notes because your groundbreaking content deserves to look and sound its very best.